Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Kent City Council Workshop. Today is Tuesday, September 21st, 2021, and I'd like to welcome anyone that is joining us this afternoon. We will get started with our presentations, and the first one is the Kent Des Moines Station Transit-Oriented Development, and I would like to welcome Bill Ellis to get us started.
Thanks, Council President. Thanks, Council. I have a couple of guests here today. I have Katie Druhl from Sound Transit's Government Affairs and J.C. Bigham, the Public Community Outreach staff person for Sound Transit's project. I've presented before with my counterpart from Sound Transit, Ed Butterfield, on the transit-oriented development out on the West Hill of Kent at the Kent Des Moines Station. We have some public outreach from the first round of engagement to report back on, and I'm just going to turn it over here today to Katie and JC to present the results. So Katie and JC, if you can hear me, turn it over to you.
Great, thanks Edward. And we'll look for the slides to come up here. Thanks Kim for your help driving those. Oh, there's me 2 times on the screen. I think once the slides come up here, we'll dive in, or maybe I'll get started as we go. So you can see JC here with me. We are here today to provide an update on the public engagement work that's been happening for the Kent Des Moines Station TOD planning. Just as Bill said, we really appreciate the opportunity to come here and give you an update this afternoon. And thank you also for making the virtual option work out. We really appreciate that. So we're excited to tell you a little bit more about the engagement work that we've been doing. As you heard when we were here in June, we had just wrapped up that great first round where we heard from almost 1,000 people. And now we're gearing up to go into our second round of public engagement. And JC is here tonight because she is our community engagement specialist on the project. Also on the line is our project director, Lynette Riley Hall. And so we're going to dive right in here. But before we do that, Kim, if you could take us to the next slide. The first thing one back, please. The first thing we'll do is the context setting that you come to know from us, which is just a reminder of what our station area looks like. So we've got that new 236 running underneath our elevated station platform, and then right now a lot of construction activity happening on those 2 gray blocks that are in the rendering here, but that will be our future transit-oriented development. Next slide, please. Okay. So when we were here in June, Edward shared this work plan, and we were just wrapping up again our phase 1 of early engagement. Since then, our team has been working at preparing the site development concepts that are based on feedback from phase 1, the city's midway plan, and input received from stakeholders. So now we're ready for phase 2 of our public engagement work, seeking additional input from the community to build on what we heard in the spring. Then, looking past the fall, we will be entering phase 3 of our work, which will include reporting back to the community on what we heard here in phase 3. It's also when we translate that community feedback into a set of development priorities and an approach for offering the property to potential development partners. We'll then be seeking approval from the Sound Transit Board on the priorities and approach that we've developed, and should they approve, then we would move forward to invite interested parties to respond to the development opportunity. So with that, we'll go to the next slide, and I'll pass it to JC to talk about engagement. Thank you.
Great, thanks Katie. So for phase 1, our main focus was the online survey that Katie mentioned. So through that survey, we were trying to get a sense of real high-level community priorities for the area. So that survey was open from May 10th through June 7th, and we got 925 responses. So that was much higher than the last survey that was done in the area, which had about half as many respondents. So we were really happy with that turnout. And we used a variety of promotional strategies to reach folks in the area. So that included a postcard that was sent out to more than 6,400 residents located within 1 mile of the station area. Also social media advertisements, an email that went to over 6,000 subscribers of the Federal Alien Extension listserv. We also worked with community-based organizations. They helped us extend to community members through their networks as well. And then we also did door-to-door business engagement near the station area. And then the website and the mailer were produced in 6 languages, so Russian, Somali, Spanish, Tagalog, Vietnamese, and English. And the social media ads were done in Spanish and English. And this, in addition to the 7 core questions that we had for the survey, we also collected additional demographic information. And that information is to help us gauge representation of historically underrepresented communities and also those most at risk of being adversely impacted by the work. So these demographic questions included race and ethnicity, age, household income, languages spoken in the home, if someone rented or owned their home, and also their zip code. And so these responses helped us to see what additional questions we may need to ask in phase 2 as well, which I can speak to a little bit more later when we get some adjustments in the next round. Thank you. And so from phase 1, what we saw was a real community desire to support the ethnic and cultural diversity of the area. Community members also showed support for providing a variety of housing types, so like family housing, housing for individuals, affordable housing. And then there was also a desire to provide ample natural outdoor space for gathering, as well as ensuring that safety is promoted in the area. We also found that pedestrian and bicycle connectivity was important for folks in the area, and as usual, parking for commuters. Community members also showed a preference for dedicating some portions of the site for small-scale emerging businesses and also daily needs services like restaurants. So these findings came from 5 multiple choice and then 2 open response questions. Next slide, please. Oh, we already got into there, sorry. And then as Katie mentioned, phase 2 includes another engagement opportunity, which will include an online open house and a more detailed survey than we saw in phase 1. So our team used that feedback and they developed concepts for the TOD area that can be shared with the public. So in the online open house, you'll see a lot more visuals to really help community members envision possibilities for the area. And then we'll be having new survey questions in there to help us really hone in on community needs and desires for the area. And we've included additional demographic questions such as household size to help us get a better sense of the community members who are responding to our questions. And then we are working on additional options for community members to indicate their racial and ethnic identity, as well as languages spoken in the home. One of the limitations of our survey tool was that we were not able to tease apart who had selected multiple options. So we allowed folks to select all, but we weren't able to actually see how many community members had selected multiple options. So we're working on that question just to give us a clear demographic information that we can share back with the public. And then in terms of recruitment, we'll be increasing the radius of the postcard to 1.5 miles of the station area. That was just 1 mile in the first round. And then we're going to be delivering to all deliverable addresses. In the first round, we just delivered the postcards specifically to residential locations. So we'll be hitting a lot more folks in for this next round. And then also because only 26% of our respondents from Survey 1 were renters, we're also going to add in more apartment complexes into our engagement effort for this round. So we'll be reaching apartment complexes up to 3 miles from the station area as well. And then we'll be translating the website and postcard again, as well as the social media ads. And we'll be hosting a live Q&A session that will go into more detail further into the presentation. We'll also be continuing our engagement with community-based organizations, and we'll be adding a promotional toolkit to make it easier for community-based organizations to share the information regarding the open house with their networks. We'll also be releasing a fact sheet that has basic information on the KDM TOD area, and that will be made available in 10 languages, KDM being that area. The fact sheets are a really important tool for us. They help the community members understand transit-oriented development. It can be a notoriously difficult concept to digest if this isn't really your world. So those fact sheets will help with that. And the fact sheets also indicate to folks how they can share their thoughts on plans for the site. So we'll be working closely with city staff and community organizations to distribute these to community members as well. Next slide, please. So our online open house will take place October 25th to November 15th. That's Monday to a Monday. And we will be using that as an opportunity to gather additional community priorities. And we really want to make sure that we share as much information as possible to really help community members understand what ideas we have, what we heard from them, and then also what ideas we have for the area. And so as I mentioned, we'll be hosting a live virtual presentation. So that's the community conversation there. That's on November 3rd at 6:30. So that'll consist of a presentation and a question and answer session. So we'll have some question and answers already ready to go, and then there'll also be an opportunity for community members to input questions during the session as well, and so we'll be able to have some nice conversation around the new questions and new information we are presenting in phase 2. And then we will have live interpretation in Spanish and American Sign Language for that event. And this will give the community members an opportunity to talk about our team directly. So I would be there, representatives from our Transit Urban Development team, Katie, and others will also be there to help support the event. And then after we wrap up phase 2, as Katie mentioned, we'll be circling back for phase 3 to report back to the community. So we'll be looking at that in early 2022. So we want to make sure we show community members how their input was used in the creation of the request for proposals that Katie mentioned, which will be how we solicit developers for the area. So this sums up phase 1 of our engagement for the Camden Moines Station Area TOD work. A summary report of findings from phase 1 has been finalized, and that will be released this week, so you'll be seeing that. And I'll pass it back over to Katie for any additional comments.
Thanks, JC, and I just want to say thank you again for your time, and a big thank you to Bill and all of the other folks that we've been working with so closely. The partnership and collaboration is incredibly valuable as we continue to advance this work, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you for the presentation. Sound like everything is going extremely well. Are there any concerns? Nothing is perfect. So you're feeling pretty good about everything?
Yeah, we're feeling pretty good. We were really intentional about having this multi-phase process. The phase 1 survey really allows an opportunity to sort of test out some, the demographic questions, and we're able to adjust in round 2. So we're pretty happy with the process. Anywhere, that we saw some things we wanted to fix, we're working on those. For example, wanting to make sure we had more renters in the pool, especially if a lot of housing in the area may be rented. So we want to make sure to reach those folks. So yeah, we're feeling pretty good about the direction this is taking, and we have great partners. As Katie mentioned, folks at the City of Kent and the community-based organizations in the area as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you, JC. Great piece of presentation. So you made a couple of changes there between the first phase and the second, increasing the number of apartments and the number of languages, both which I was glad to see. Was that because of the feedback you gained in the first section, or it was always the plan to reach out further? How did you come about making those additions?
It was based on what we found from phase 1. So we were really wanting to make sure that we had a clear plan, but we did want to stay flexible enough to make sure that we were able to take what we learned from phase 1 and really integrate that into phase 2. So that's why there was a few month break in there. So those were adaptations that we made specifically based on, we didn't necessarily hear from community members that we needed to reach out to more renters, but that was based on our assessment and in conversations with other stakeholders. That was the decision that we made to increase that radius. So some feedback, but mostly just our analysis and coordination with others involved in the work in the area.
Well, thank you. Very much appreciated on both counts.
Great. Any other questions about that? And just a reminder, you said that information on the first phase that you've gathered will be available this next week.
Yes, I'll be sending some of those out. Katie will probably be sending the ones out that will make it to you. So we'll make sure that gets into everyone's hands. And then we'll also be putting a link to a PDF of that report on our Sound Transit website for the Kent Des Moines station area. So we'll make that available to the public as well, and the community-based organizations that we work with.
Great, thank you. Appreciate you sharing the information with us. Thanks for joining us.
Well, with that, unless you have any questions for me about the process or the project, thank you, and thanks to our guests. Thank you for coming.
Bill, I might just quickly add,
Yeah, sure.
we would love when we do have the link live and the information, the Zoom information for folks to join the community conversation. We would love to have the council's help weighing in, of course, but then also sharing the link out on all of your channels so that you know it's getting out to lots of audiences.
Certainly, definitely. As soon as we have it, we'll do that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Bill. All right, we are going to just take a couple seconds here to move on to our next presentation, which is our performance measures.
I think that's me.
That is you. Welcome, Michael.
Okay. Good evening, Council. I'm Michael Mage, Government Performance Coordinator, here to give you an update on our performance measure dashboard that we've been working on in earnest for the last over a year now. And I was giving you an update in late July, and here I am again following up on that update with a bit more information. And as a reminder, as the slides are coming up, this is a part of our Advanced Kent program for performance and improvement. And the goal of this performance dashboard is really to connect back to the council goals that you all have established. So as soon as the slides are up here, I really appreciate Kim driving the mouse. Thank you so much, Kim. And we can advance a couple slides there, Kim. And one more, please. Excellent. So here is your quick visual of what we're trying to connect to. As you all know, we have established a vision, mission, values, and goals. And we have posters with these displayed around the city. And our task in this performance measure dashboard has really been, as we like to say, bringing the council goals to life, actually connecting performance metrics to those goals that have been set forth: thriving city, evolving infrastructure, inclusive community, innovative government, and sustainable services. And so, Kim, if you'll take us to the next slide. This has been what we've been discussing for the last year and what we've accomplished so far. I do like to remind folks that this is still very much a work in progress, but we are getting to the fun stage where we can actually see some of these ideas come together, and that's what we wanted to share with you today. So far, we have managed to reduce 394 ideas down to the 29 vital few metrics which we would like to publish on this dashboard. We've reduced 14 themes down to what we're calling 6 citywide objectives. We've identified data champions in all city departments to help us with this work and to make it sustainable moving forward. We've engaged our communications team, and we've done a lot of good review and had a lot of good conversation at the ELT level. And now we look forward to moving this forward and sharing some of the work with you. So just some of the work in progress is still that data collection piece. We are still working on a lot of the language, the descriptions that you'll soon see in a moment, as well as how are we even going to put this whole dashboard together? What platform will we use? That's still a question that we need to get clarity on moving forward as well. And so our target publish date for all of this is in Q1 of next year, but as I said, we're getting much closer to seeing what this deliverable will look like. So in the next slide, I just want to share some good news up front. We did receive some recognition for innovations in local government award from the Washington State affiliate of ICMA. And this really speaks to the interdepartmental collaboration and teamwork that has been happening largely through our advanced team, what we call A-Team. So a big thank you to that team of interdepartmental representatives. We know that this work is often on top of their regular day jobs, so we really appreciate their time, energy, and commitment in helping to do something that's pretty new at the city, and to their willingness to learn about performance and to immediately try to apply some of the stuff that we're learning for the city. So next slide, please. Here is some visuals of our executive leadership team in action, actually narrowing down the vital few. So again, we had to take quite a bit of metrics that we were thinking about and narrow those down to something that was manageable by internal city staff, and that made sense to the public. And so this is where we had our final meeting, our last meeting, I should say, in July, really kind of narrowing these ideas down, and we kind of had a little bit of a game show atmosphere. It was a little bit of fun, as well as getting the multi-voting down to those vital few metrics. Next slide, Kim. This is the decision criteria that we really took all of our metrics through, and this comes from best practices. A lot of other organizations use something like this. Ours, we took from a source called GovX for performance analytics, and it really helps to take our any metrics that we're thinking about through some decision gates, as I like to call them, and we begin at the top and work our way down through these various questions, really asking ourselves, first of all, is the data available? Do we own the data? What's the refresh frequency? Do we have a performance measure for something like that? Data quality is also a key piece that we want to look into, as well as the level of effort it takes to collect some of this data. And so we take it through this decision-making criteria. We try to see if it has a direct or indirect relationship to council goals, if it's even understandable by the general public, and then, of course, mutually agreed to by ELT. So we take it through that criteria, and this is sort of, the next slide is what we have for you today. So hopefully you can see it. I know that the type is a little small, but these are the 28 metrics that we've identified so far, and we've broken them into those citywide objectives, which I'll just say include diversity, equity, and inclusion, public safety, economic vitality and livability, community engagement, as you see, is just split out between the two columns there at the bottom, government accountability, and dependable infrastructure. Just a few other notes here. You can see at the far right-hand column where we see these metrics linking back to council goals. So really trying to be very clear as to which measures link back to which goals. In some cases, it is more than a one-to-one relationship. It is arguable in some cases that there's a one-to-many relationship with some of these metrics, but that's where we put them. And for the data side, which is what we're still collecting, the yellow cells mark the data that we're still looking to collect with our department data champions. So that work is still in progress and won't yet be reflected in this draft dashboard that we're showing you today. So this gives you a sense of the breadth of all of the metrics that we've collected so far, but we also wanted to give a sense of how all of these metrics are coming together. But a few more points really quick if I could. In the next slide, we also wanted to just put out there that there are some performance metrics that we have yet to collect that we are still trying to identify. So in this case, we're looking at public transportation metrics. We know we want to include that, but it's really a conversation as to what is most appropriate for this dashboard, what is within the city's scope of control to include, and as well as business community metrics. So we're still largely in conversation with our internal subject matter experts around those ideas, and we can always add metrics as we move forward. And that is part of the whole point of putting this dashboard together, is to continuously review, monitor, and update these metrics and see how they apply to decision making. So next slide, please, Kim. And I mentioned this during our last meeting, but we have been drawing a lot of inspiration from our friends over at the City of Williamsburg on the East Coast. They have a dashboard that we like quite a bit that we've been drawing a lot of inspiration from. And so that is where you will see how our demonstration is set up for today, is largely in that same layout and format. So we'll go to the next slide, and Kim is so gracious enough to help navigate. This gets a little less linear because we wanted to show you what it would actually look like on a web page. And so we would have something like this, where users could click into each of these citywide objectives. And so we'll begin by clicking into the DEI objective. And you can see this allows users to drill down into these various performance metric areas and get more information. And so this is where we would start to highlight diversity, equity, inclusion at the city. Of course, we've had lots of conversations about this throughout really over the last year. We are looking at how we actually display progress on this particular theme using these metrics. So the metrics that we're looking at currently, again, the highlighted ones in yellow, we still are pending data collection. But it includes things that are both internal and external, such as the number of diverse candidates that apply for open positions, which would then be an input for the second metric we have there, which is the number of diverse staff members. That's a self-report number. Also includes things like the percentage of employees completing DEI training, which, as you all know, is rolled out to all city staff, and we want to be able to track that is being completed by all staff. And then finally, we have a more external-facing measure. This is for our utility Lifeline program, so percentage of Lifeline customers versus total residential customers. We're going to look into that as well. And that's really speaking to the inclusive efforts of making sure that all residents, regardless of their income level, can actually participate and get utilities at a discount if they qualify. So let's click into, just a couple other things to mention here before we click in, Kim, sorry. We have a narrative description at the top. We are still seeking feedback on these narratives. We're just kind of have some rough placeholder text there for you all to see how it's going to come together. And then, of course, we would also clearly display how these link back to the council goals. But if we do click into that number of diverse staff metric there, we would see the drill down further displayed in this way. And so again, this is reported staff diversity. Still working on some of the titles here. And the blue bars in this case over between 2015 and 2020 represent the number of total benefited employees. We also have two lines, the orange line representing the number of Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are on our staff. Again, that's a self-report number, as well as the green line, which is the number of female staff currently for those years represented. And we have done a lot of conversation at the ELT level to really discuss the diversity. While race is an important and ethnicity is an important factor for diversity, we don't want to limit ourselves to that alone, and we're always looking at expanding that definition to include things like our demographic information, such as we have for multiple generations in our workforce, and we're working on other charts and graphs that can speak to that as well. But this is the current state for this reported staff diversity. So if we go back to the objective level, Kim, we can kind of go back to the home level, and we'll dive into the public safety objective area. And again, similar layout here. We have some metrics that still need some to be collected. Number of minutes from dispatch to arrival on scene is a very typical police metric that we've seen in other municipalities, and that is something that we want to start displaying here for our own PD. Number of crisis response team responses to mental health calls. This is to my knowledge, a new program, a new effort that we want to begin tracking data on, and really hoping to see that those crisis response teams are being effective in reaching out and serving those mental health calls rather than an officer all the time. Ratio of officers per 1,000 population is a metric that we are continuing from our previous performance measure efforts that we usually publish in the budget book. And then I'll just mention that the last metric there is the percentage of graduates from our DUI court program, really tracking the recidivism of graduates after having completed that program and wanting to make sure that they do not repeat. So if we go into the ratio of officers per 1,000, we can see this metric, and again, we are also working to identify as many targets as possible. And so a target really answers the question, what does success look like at the metric level? And in our discussions at ELT, we're really looking at this one as regular growth in the ratio of officers per 1,000 population would be ideal year over year, trying to help to tell that story here at the City of Kent, that even when some of our, we always want to be looking at the trend of our metrics and establishing appropriate targets to meet our goals. And we've also, for this particular metric I'll mention, are looking into sort of the average of Valley-Com cities for comparable starters, so that we know that we're in line with some of our other peer cities as well. So we want to set this up to highlight best practice measures always, and to show what we're doing well and where we can make improvement. We also want to show that. If we can go back to the objective, Kim, I know we're bouncing around, but there's one other thing actually on this slide that I wanted to show. And Kim, if you could, you see we have this link at the bottom of the description that says why this matters, what we're doing about it, and how satisfied our residents. Kim, if you could click that link. We want, this is fairly typical language that we see at other municipalities. We think it's done in sort of a plain language way that makes it accessible to the average person in the public. And this is kind of gives you a sense of how we would present some descriptions around the public safety objective and how we would talk about sort of each of these particular headers here. At the very, so we have why this matters. The what we're doing about it section also gives us the ability to really highlight existing projects, programs, and initiatives that would tie back to, in this case, public safety. So you see we're kind of listing a few of the ones that we know about, but then of course are also looking for feedback from our other subject matter experts at the city to help fill out this in more detail. And then the last piece I want to say, just to tee up some information here, is the how satisfied our residents section. This would ideally link back to, as we discussed in my previous update, the resident survey and the need to eventually get feedback from residents and ideally position it here on this dashboard in a way that the outputs that the City of Kent are creating actually tie back to the outcomes that and experience that residents are expecting from the city. So that's how we would eventually create that linkage. Again, we haven't done a survey since 2018, so that is something that we would look to do in the next year of work, I would imagine. So if we go back to the very home level, Kim, I'll take us through these next ones. Let's go to economic vitality and livability. All of these metrics are currently needing data collection, so there's nothing for us to further drill down to, but I'll just mention they include things like the number of days from request to permit review. So our permit center providing some information for both residential and commercial permits, as well as for the inspection process. We want to track the number of health and safety compliant multifamily units, as well as monitoring our progress, the city's progress, the development progress out there in the City of Kent, and monitor it as a percentage of complete housing unit target with King County county. So really looking at the targets that have been established at the county level and monitoring what's actually going out there in the land of our developers, and how on target we are to hit that, even though we are dependent on developers to help us hit that goal. So if we go back out, we can drill into community engagement, and this is where we find a number of our metrics related to both our communications team as well as some community efforts through our parks department, and in particular looking at our human services department. So in this case, we're working on a little bit of language for this first metric here, but really examining percent of residents. In some cases, we need to filter down that language a little bit to vulnerable residents, at-risk residents, something like that. Percentage of residents served through human services and community development block grant partners. A number of residents served by funded human services programs. Number of participants in parks and recreation programs, so really showing that for the community, what programs are being put on for the wider Kent community. And number of human services programs funded, so a slightly different metric there. And if we click into the percent increase in social media platform, I think we can see another data story here. Okay, so this relates to our efforts on our communications team, and in particular the social platforms that they're using to engage people online. We're looking at including different metrics for in-person as well, but this is for the social media, and you can see that they have a target of 12 to 15% annual increase in platform followers. And we've got Facebook, Twitter, as well as a dotted orange line that represents that particular target. And as you can see in 2019, they've start to far exceed, especially for Twitter, that percentage of growth. So already just looking at the data helps us to establish more, in this case, perhaps a more industry standard or more aggressive target, since they're already outperforming what they had put there already. So we're looking at that and probably going to be making an update to that particular target as well. So if we go back, and one more, and go into government accountability. We do have a few more metrics on this one. A lot of these carry over from our previous performance measure publishings in the budget book. We'll quickly go through a few of these. If you could click into Snp Bond Rating, Kim. So this is our bond rating. A little bit harder to visualize. A table seems to be the best we can do for this, just given that we're not dealing with numbers, we're dealing with an actual rating system. But we wanted to show both the highest and lowest to show that how well we're doing currently, but also that we also have a little bit of room to grow in terms of this Snp Bond Rating. And if we go back, Kim, just for the sake of showing that Moody's is a similar setup with their particular bond rating system. And if we go back to the number of public records requests, Kim, this is your wheelhouse. So this is also tells another interesting data story. And as you can see, the number of requests received in the bars increases dramatically in 2019 from 2018. And the city clerk has established a particular target of having a 5-day completion rate to get back to the recipient with the request. And that that our staff, even though the demand has increased considerably, and we know that that's for probably a few different reasons, including body-worn cameras, that they have still been able to meet that demand, albeit with some changes to their internal processes as well. So this helps us to actually see and tell the story through data, and also to make decisions moving forward. So it is interesting to see these numbers, and then also to supplement it with background information as well. So, and then if we go into the audit findings, this is an important performance metric for the city, and we're always trying to make sure that this is an unqualified opinion or a clean audit, more or less equaling 0 in the following areas of accountability: an accountability audit, a financial audit, and a single audit. Again, just if you look at those dates from 2013 through 2019, still collecting that 2020 data, We have performed quite well in the last few years, but we wanted to show historical data to give some context. That's not like it's always zeros, but we like it to be zero. So that's where we are with that particular metric. And then here's my wheelhouse. So this is a number of enrollments in lean training. As you all know, we do have an internal program for Lean Six Sigma tools, method, and mindset for our city staff. And you can see where my predecessor, Todd Babcock, did some great work in 2017, left the organization in 2018, and we're gradually trying to build up those numbers and attendance as well. With numbers like this, we all, it's interesting to talk about these, but in many cases, we can only track at the individual level, and it can't always cover for things like duplicates in terms of people taking more than one lean class, that sort of thing. So those are the types of data quality conversations that we want to have moving forward, and it's just helpful to see the data to even see what it's telling us. So we'll go back, and we'll go back again, and we'll go to our final one on dependable infrastructure. And so this is, as it's written in the council goals, infrastructure, of course, is not just our streets and roads, but increasingly our IT infrastructure as well. And so our IT department is going to supply us with numbers related to the number of IT projects deploying within budget, and then of course within schedule. So we're looking forward to some data collection on that, as well as number of tons of recycling. You can click into that one, Ken. So this is tons of recycling tons of recycling and compost diverted from landfill. And so those are two different numbers, but we wanted to display them side by side so that we can continue to track this moving forward. And if we go back, we can also see the number of potholes filled. We had some discussion on this particular one in at ELT, and one kind of looking at 2018, and we believe that can be attributed to the deep freeze in 2018, when probably a lot of repair issues were needed for potholes. And this also gives us an opportunity to share our Report a Pothole initiative, which actually has a very short response time compared to some of our peers that do it within 48 to 72 hours. My understanding is here our city staff can do it in a much quicker manner. So that's always something that we want to highlight. And finally, this one, and then we'll do, and I'll mention the last one. So the number of paved lanes assessed as satisfactory. This is for our streets, and making sure that they meet that pavement condition index at 70% or higher. So again, the percentages that you see in this chart, as we've discussed internally, are the percentages that meet that PCI level that we're looking for. So that's that one. And then the last one, I'll just mention number of new lineal footage of sidewalks and trails is another new metric that we'll be collecting. So with that, Kim, if you can hit the end demo on the right-hand side there, I'll just have some final closing thoughts here, and then I'm happy to take any questions you may have. And I know that this question came up from Councilmember Larimer about what platform do we intend to use for this dashboard, and it was a great question, something that we've been noodling on, and we think we have some good internal options that we've already begun to explore. These are those options here, Microsoft Power BI. We also have GIS, which can display a lot of this information for us. I am looking into another platform that is currently being used by Risk Management, Origami. We also have a custom option that our internal development team could work on, but we probably can satisfy our need with one of the other three platforms, is my hunch, but we're starting to look at that right now. So next slide, Kim, please. So here's where we're at. These are our sort of where we're at in our next steps. And we've cleared some major hurdles and are working our way through this approval process. Again, in 2022, early next year, is when we hope to pull all this together, figure out the platform, get out a reporting cadence, and actually begin making regular updates and publish that dashboard. But where we're at today, council members, is really wanting to incorporate anything we missed, any glaring omissions, we would really like to hear from you. Largely, as I mentioned, are there any key metrics that we should have considered that you want us to go back and look at, or if the structure is needing a little bit of additional work? Those are, for me, the key pieces that I would be looking at. So next slide, Kim. With that, I believe I have time for your questions.
Wonderful presentation, and it's super user-friendly, so I'm really excited for this. Councilmember Kaur, I see that you have your camera on. Did you have a question before we move on to my colleagues?
No, I did not. Thank you.
Okay. Good to see you, by the way. Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Madam President. I do have a couple of questions, Michael. I think on some of the charts you talk about what success looked like. I'm just curious why that would not be on all of the charts. I mean, I think the average person looking at some of those charts, we should have a target, I think, what would success look like. I know some of them you had it and some you didn't.
Yes, thank you for that question, Councilmember. We are still working on identifying targets at a metric-by-metric basis, and as I shared, so many of the metrics we're still in the process of collecting the data for. So what we would want to do is collect that data and look at what the data is telling us, and then also be able to determine appropriate targets at that time. So that work is yet to be fully completed, and I do agree that we, as much as possible, we should have success measures for all of them.
And then on your D&I page, you talked about diverse candidates for applicants, but I don't see a relationship to the number of staff, right? So, I mean, I can see what my staff is today, but that I'm assuming, I know you're still developing this here, I'm assuming as we go forward, we'll be able to say, X amount of people might apply as applicants, but how many of those will really get hired for the job? You know what I mean?
Yes. So, and if I'm hearing correctly, we intend to include the number of diverse candidates that apply for positions, and that is something that we've been talking about at the ELT level as something that we have control over. Because if we're looking at just the number of diverse staff that we have today and just monitor that moving forward, that could, just given the number of positions that become available or sort of the hiring environment, that becomes a much longer time horizon to actually achieve results than something that we could control at the candidate stage, which would be an increase in that number of diverse candidates, so that we know that at least we're drawing from a good, well-represented pool of candidates that could then become city staff members. So we're seeing that as kind of an input for the ultimate output, which would be to increase the level of staff diversity and make it a reflection of the community we serve. So I hope that answers your question. Please let me know if I can.
No, you're spot on. Okay. And the other question, I know Derek, you might answer this. I know we're doing a lot of stuff with public safety. Is that's going to be something totally different than what we had talked about from a public safety? Yeah, so that wouldn't be on that particular dashboard there?
You're referring to the race and equity data. Yes, that would be a separate.
Totally separate. Okay, that's cool. Thank you. And then two more comments. One, you probably want to update. We're no longer the 10th most diverse city. I think we number 8 now?
Yeah.
So you might want to update that as you go forward.
Will do.
And I have one other one here. What was it, Bill? All right, maybe I'll come back to him. I'm good for now. Thank you.
Councilmember Larmer.
Thank you, Council President. Great presentation. I love seeing the progress on this, and you guys have made great progress. Really impressed with that. A couple things that just stood out for me as maybe gaps is it felt a little light on sort of our parks data. I think it's one thing that, and maybe it's just because the data maybe doesn't change a lot, but I think it's important to communicate to the public, how many acres of developed parkland or how many acres of natural land that we have, especially now that we've taken put all that time and effort into cleaning up Mill Creek, and we have those more natural opportunities. So, and then also I think another metric I remember from Parks Committee was dollar spending, like per resident. There was like some metrics around that. So just for a little light on like what we're doing in that space. Yeah, and otherwise I think it looks really, really good. And I'm really pleased with what I'm seeing. Thank you.
I have one more question, Tony. We get to him.
Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So just tagging on to my fellow council member over there, Councilmember Boyce, for the performance measures, I'd also like to be able to see the breakout on the diversity and equity stuff by the department or division, to see where the division, so we know how many employees we know how many are BIPOC or are female, but where are they? Is it housed in one department? Is it spread evenly throughout the city? So to see that by department, also by level. And then as far as the hiring, is that both for internal and external positions? So if there's an announcement inside of it internally as a job opening, so you see who is applying there. So I'd also like to be able to see promotions by broken down the same way. And then is there a way to be able to tell where the social media clicks are coming from in the city, whether somebody lives or works here or not? And I know there's value to both because we want people to come here who don't live or work here, but it'd also be good to be able to see who are we reaching, where are they?
Great questions. And I'm happy to follow up on all of these. I don't always have answers at hand for some of these. I am not always the data champion for all of these metrics, but I'm happy to follow up on those, and those are all great points.
And then did I see that only 49% of the paved streets are rated satisfactorily?
So that is I think we need to work on the titling for that, because it is it can be a little bit misleading, that particular metric, because it is rated as satisfactory, but it's the percentage. So there's a percentage that we're trying to hit, which is that 70%, and it's all paved lanes that actually hit that percentage. So I'm just going to pull it up here. Does that answer your question?
So that was a percentage of the number that we want to hit?
Correct. So I just need to have it up in front of me. One quick second.
No, that's good enough. I wanted to know that part. So, yeah, on some other questions, but that's fine for now.
So 49% in 2020 is, I think, what you were asking.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Boyce.
And one last one. First of all, I forgot to say kudos, right? Good job, right? And the question at you, but I also want to say really good job. No, Derek, we started this quite some time ago, and really we have come a long way. So thank you. I want to make sure I give you your props, right? So then my last question is, if I, as a citizen, am I allowed to, do you have a place like a comment where people can make a suggestion to that? Will that be part of it going forward? Do you see that being part of it?
Well, certainly through the resident feedback on whatever survey device we end up using to collect that for the, obviously related to city performance itself. But if you're talking about the dashboard development, okay, that would be a little bit of a different consideration, but something certainly to think about.
I guess what I'm saying, if I'm looking at it as a Joe Blow citizen, right, and I want to maybe make a suggestion, ask a question, would I have the ability to go in and make a comment and ask a question? That probably, I don't know, may generate a lot of feedback, but just something to think about. So
absolutely, yeah, that would be something definitely that we could look into.
But once again, good job, Mike. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Councilmember Larmer.
Thank you, Michael. So one more thing, I just had a thought. When you're looking at the data, I know you're still building out or trying to figure out what you can do in the transportation space. One thing I continue to hear from residents is sort of that last mile connections. So, and I know that when I've seen transportation stats in a regional level, sometimes that's kind of left out. So I think as you're looking for data, see what you can find for both those like big connections to job centers, but also that sort of that last mile and that those smaller connections too would be, I'd love to see something on that.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you. I'd also like to see not only to places like work, but doctor's office, shopping places, other places that people go often. Thank you.
So I think when you first started off the presentation, you said there were like 900 and some metrics that you started with that you narrowed down. Now I think we just gave you a bunch more to add to your list. So looking forward to hearing back from you on maybe these were on your list and you didn't consider them for a particular reason, or maybe they are something that you would look at moving forward. But again, great job. Obviously a lot of work and a lot of conversations to get to where you are. So really appreciate you sharing this with us today.
Thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
And then lastly, Madam Mayor.
I actually have a clarifying question for Councilmember Larmer and Fincher. So are you asking for us to report out on Metro data? It's not, the city doesn't provide that service, whether it be full trip or first mile, last mile. So you want Metro?
Was it going to be Metro? Was it going to be like what's available in the community, even if it's not within our control?
Maybe that's a Michael question.
I thought that he'd said part of it, that we had to look at whose control it was. But I think part of that will tell us where we may be needing more service also.
Yeah.
Well, and I know Metro's working on their own dashboard as well, so.
This is the conversation that we have, right? This is exactly the conversations that we have when we're selecting metrics. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Any other questions? All right. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. We are done with workshop. That gives you a little bit of time to take a break. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll be back at 7 o'clock, and we are adjourned.